Every human heart contains something of God, because the heart is the closest we get to God. And in every human heart, there is the desire to do good. And so we come to the saint. Now, all of us have inherited certain images of saints. And what I have in mind is a little different. What's come down in history to us are suffering individuals on crosses, dying from spears and arrows, victims of human ignorance and human cruelty. Or the saint is seen as some sweet gentleman, usually, with a faraway look in his eye, living outside the mainstream of society. Let's understand a saint in a different way. Let's understand a saint as inseparable from the warrior. The warrior and the saint are different sides of the same coin. Because to do good in a world that is bent on self-destruction is very difficult, and you have to be a warrior. To protect the child in yourself, to protect children. To manifest the courage of the artist, to control the animal. All this requires the warrior. And the weapons of the warrior are those of spirit, of courage and tenacity. And so the warrior and the saint need each other. Let me tell you how they work together. Frank Capra was a great American film director in Hollywood. He was born in Sicily, grew up in a ghetto, and through talent and bravery and good fortune, he worked his way up to the top of the hierarchy at Columbia Studios. In 10 years, he became their top director. But he was a very ambitious man, Frank Capra. And more than anything, he wanted to win an Oscar, the Hollywood Oscar, the symbol of success in America. But it always eluded him. And then suddenly, surprisingly, a picture he made called It Happened One Night, starring Clark Gable and Claudette Colbert, won an unprecedented 5 Academy Awards in 1934, including Best Director for Capra. Well, his dream was answered, but something funny happened to him on the way home from the Oscars. He started to worry, because having scaled the Mount Everest of filmland, he saw that he had nowhere to go but down, and this frightened him. The prospect of failure scared him. And he started to feel tired and fatigued and worried, and eventually he started to get sick, and the sickness progressed. He had night sweats, high fever, extreme fatigue, but the doctors were completely undecided in their diagnosis. They couldn't figure out what it was. There were certain symptoms of tuberculosis, but not quite. So he told a close friend who was living with him and his wife at the time, a fellow named Max Winslow, a song publishing partner of Irving Berlin. He said, "Max, I'm dying." And 10 days later, he was literally close to death. And Max came into his room one day and said, "There's somebody at the door to see you, stranger." Capra said, "I can't see anybody." Max says he insists. Capra said, well, show him up. He refuses to come up. Well, I'm not going down. So Max eventually persuaded Capra to come down. And he went to the library, and a stranger was standing there. And he said, Mr. Capra, sit down. Mr. Capra sat down. Mr. Capra, you're a coward. A what? A coward. And infinitely worse, you're an offense to God. You hear that man in there? Max had turned on the radio in Capra's room, and Hitler's raspy voice was shrieking out of the speakers. You hear that man in there? He is screaming hatred and poison throughout the world. And how many people can he speak to? 15 or 20 million? And for how long? 20 minutes? You, Mr. Capra, you can talk to hundreds of millions of people, and for 2 hours in the dark. The gifts that you have are not yours. They belong to God. They are God's gifts to you. And when you do not use God's gifts that you are blessed with for His purposes, you are an offense to God and to humanity. Good day, sir. And he walked up. And Capra was completely stunned. Never met this man in his life. Had no idea where he came from. And tears of shame started to come down his face, and he felt tremendous indignation and self-anger. And this gave him the energy to get up. He packed his bags, he took his wife, and he went on a holiday to Palm Springs, and he started to recuperate, to regain the 30 pounds he had lost in the few weeks of his sickness. And he went back to work, a different person. And the films he created had a tremendous effect on people throughout the world. Mr. Deeds Goes to Town, Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, It's a Wonderful Life, It Happened, no, we did that one, Lost Horizons, because these films were idealistic, and they were about the little guy, the little David, who fights the Goliath of corruption, of injustice, who fights for truth, all these old corny things, but he made beautiful films, and everybody watches them and loves them today. And he said, you know, when this unknown man, this stranger, rescued me from death, he served as a magnet to dedicate my talents to mankind. And I vowed that all the work I would do in the future would come from me, would come inside, from my insides, from my heart and mind, the things that I would care about. I wouldn't brag about being able to film the phone book and make it funny, about doing clever things. From now on, I would try and blend ideals and entertainment in a meaningful story. And no matter what differences I had with directors and writers and actors, I would make the story mine, and I would take my time to do it. Well, a lot of people thought this was arrogance in me, and you arrogant Capra, but quite the opposite. For the first time, I wasn't using films for myself. I was doing what was right for film, for the profession. And since those few calm words that were spoken to me by this little man, I understood that I really cared about the dreams of others, and I would dedicate my talents to those dreams.